going to bring me through my valley, through my dark tunnel, through my dark night, through my disappointment, through the hell and the hurt, through the heartache and the pain. I had a faith that will not faint. I had fainted. I would have given up. I would have thrown in the towel. I would have called it quits. But I believed otherwise. I believed that God would see me through. David reminds us today that we can endure our pain. We can endure our pain. We can overcome the hurt. We can overcome and we can go through the dark nights of the soul through trusting in God. Yes, we can say like David in the text, I would have fainted if I had not believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. David knew that his only hope is in God. He knew that his only hope was in God. Looking at the background of the text, David had hope. David had faith. David had a vision beyond his present circumstance. According to verses 10 through 12, he had already lost his mother and father. His enemies and haters were all around him. He was in the valley of despair, and yet he trusted God to keep him, the living God to sustain him. He trusted the living God to support him, to teach him and deliver him. David says, I would have fainted. I would have given up. I would have lost my mind. But I believe that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I had faith that I would see a better day. Faith, faith, faith. What is faith? Faith is a divine vision of seeing beyond your present circumstances, your pain, your struggles, your problems, and into a bigger and brighter day bigger and brighter future. Hebrews 11:1 says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. David said, I had fainted if I had not believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Habakkuk 2:4 says, the just shall live by faith. Like David, we must believe that with God on our side, life is worth the living. With God on our side, life can get better. With God on our side, justice will prevail. With God on our side, the dream will become a reality. With God on our side, the vision will be realized. The day will be brighter. The future will be optimistic. With God on our side, the goal is attainable. The foe is beatable. The impossible is possible. With God on our side, the star is reachable. The task is achievable. The power is accessible. The future is available with God on our side. We can climb the mountain. We can cross the river with God on our side. We can make it. We will make it because we have a faith that will not faint. In verses 11 and 12, David is saying, don't let haters cause you to give up. Don't let your enemies cause you to turn around and go back. Don't let your enemies cause you to give up on your dreams. David said, trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I would have fainted. I would have lost focus. I would have just quit. I would have dropped everything and sit down and die if I had not believed to see the goodness of the Lord. But I have faith. I have a faith that will not faint. How do you get this kind of faith, preacher? How did David get this kind of faith? This faith that endured, this faith that believed God is reliable, that God is faithful to see you through. I would suggest to you that David relied on a liberating past. He relied on a liberating past. Somebody say liberating past. David saw and knew what God had already done in his life. And so he could say like Ty Tribbett, if he did it before, he can do it again. Oh yes, if you can remember what God has already done in your life, then you can make it. And this is what David was banking on. David is confident in knowing that God will see him through. This psalm is a testimony of how God delivered David from the hands of the enemies and the snares of Satan. When David said in the beginning of this psalm, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, of whom shall I fear?" He was reflecting on what God had already brought him out of. That's what he was doing when he said, "When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and they fell," past tense. This is what God has already done. David could say, "God already delivered me from the lions and the bears in the Judean hills. God already delivered me from the giant Goliath in the valley of Elah. God delivered me from the king Saul when he tried to kill me. But God did it all. And so if he did it before, he can do it again." And this is how you gain faith. A faith that will not faint. Has the Lord ever answered your prayers? Have you ever been stuck between a rock and a hard place and the Lord brought you out? Have you ever been down and out and the Lord picked you up? Has the Lord brought you out? Has the Lord ever saved your soul and made you whole? Then you ought to have faith enough to say, "I got a faith that will not faint." And if he did it before, he can do it again. But just in case you cannot remember the times that God brought you through, just in case you're too young to think about a time when God came through for you, then you have the Bible, you have the biblical record to show what God has done in the past. You not only have the Bible, but you also have your own history and the testimony of your forebearers to tell you what God has done for us in the past. Think about the dark history of African Americans. We were ripped from our homeland, brutally packed into slave ships, brought to a strange land, placed under slavery and oppression, and forced to live under unusually subhuman conditions. But God, through it all, God brought us through. But through it all, God made a way for us. Yes, we had enough doom and gloom in our lives to call it quits. We had enough pain and misery in our lives to commit suicide. But there was something on the inside that kept telling us to go ahead. Something on the inside that made us believe that there's a bright side somewhere. That made us believe that we will be able to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And that something was enduring faith in the living God. Yes, we could say like David, we would have fainted if we had not believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. We've lost our minds. We would have lost our mind. We would have given up a long time ago had we not believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I wonder, will you pray with me? Yes, this is what we must do. Look back at our liberated past and trust the God who saw us through. Listen, if the Israelites could survive Egyptian slavery, if the Jews could survive the Holocaust, if the South Africans could survive the cruelty of apartheid, if our foreparents could survive African American slavery, if our mothers and fathers could survive the Jim Crow South of the 1950s and 60s, then we have that same kind of faith to know that he can do it again and we can survive in the here and now. so thank God for the Harriet Tubmans who believed. Thank God for the Nat Turners who believed. Thank God for the Mary McLeod Bethunes who believed. Thank God for the Frederick Douglasses who believed. Thank God for the Martin Luther King Jr.'s who believed. Thank God for the Fannie Lou Hamers who believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And so with this enduring faith, some survived lions' dens. Some survived and endured slavery with this enduring faith. Some survived the pit and the prison. Some survived crossing over Red Seas. Some survived wilderness terrain. Some overcame serpents and pestilence. With this enduring faith, some survived the flood, the flame, and the fiery furnaces. Some survived shipwreck and venomous vipers and vicious mobs and dangerous persecutions. Why? Because they had enduring faith. David said, I would have fainted if I had not believed. And so the question is, what happens when you do not believe? The minute you stop believing, you die. Yes, the minute you stop dreaming, you stop hoping, you stop having faith, you die. And so without faith, without a vision for a brighter day, without hope, we will faint and die. The word faint in the text comes from the Hebrew word ye'ef, which means fatigued, which means to be exhausted, which means to run out of steam. It means to lose hope. It means to be weary and to give up. Without faith, we faint. Without faith, we get weary. Without faith, we give up. Without faith, we die. Have you noticed that faith and fainting cannot live in the same house? Have you noticed that faith and fainting can't even dwell in the same room, can't sit in the same room together? You have either enduring faith or you are fainting. So without faith, you give up. Without faith, you'll turn around. Without faith, you'll go back. Without this enduring faith, you will faint, especially nowadays when we see the dismal conditions of our communities, the high teenage pregnancy, the youth violence, the guns and the gangs. That's enough to faint and be weary. When we see the tragic murder of a Trayvon Martin and a not guilty verdict of his killer, that's enough to faint and be weary. When we see the high school dropout rate and more of our young men in prison than there are on college campuses, that's enough to faint and be weary. When we see our children and women being brutally killed by domestic violence, that's enough to faint and be weary. Yes, without faith, we would faint. We would be weary. But faith tells us to wait on the Lord and be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Isaiah said to the Jews who were discouraged when they went back to Jerusalem to build the temple. They were so discouraged and despondent. And Isaiah told them this: even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, walk and not faint. With this faith, I will not faint. And so what is David telling us about enduring faith today?